Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Power of Sourcing 2025. I'm Gwen, and I'm thrilled to have you all here for today's session. I'm excited to introduce our speaker for this session, Linus Diestelkamp, who will present on how small sourcing teams can drive big impact. But before we dive into the presentation, let me briefly explain what we do at Matchar. So Matchar is a global embedded RPO. We provide recruiting and sourcing teams tailored to the needs of scale-ups and enterprises like Action, Miro, Booking.com, Eneco, and many others. And if you're looking to grow your team with dedicated support, feel free to reach out to us. We'd love to explore how we can help. And one last thing before we welcome Linus, take a moment to subscribe to our YouTube channel, please, and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. Now, Linus, welcome to the stage. Hi, Linus.
Hey, great to be here.
Hi, nice to meet you. So, are you ready?
I am indeed ready and excited.
Nice. So last week, Balazs shared a thought-provoking perspective on the end of sourcing. And your presentation today, it takes a bit more of an optimistic approach. Do you see yourself on the opposite side of that debate, or do you think that there's a middle ground between the two perspectives?
Yeah, I'd rather see me in the middle ground. I'd rather say instead of ending, we should evolve. Everything will change. And I
Nice.
mean, there's so much debate about AI and how it will replace us. Let's work with it.
I like that. Okay, great. Now, Linus, the floor is yours. Good luck.
Thank you. Okay, thanks. Hi, everyone. So yeah, I mean, as we just had a chat about, sourcing needs to evolve, and I want to talk a bit about how you can have a small team that has big impact. And as it is the nature of a sourcer, you would always want to be lazy and be more efficient. And this is what I want to show you. And actually, I need to go back a bit and say, like, yeah, pick up from this is the end of sourcing to saying when I started sourcing in 2014, so 10 years ago, sources were pretty much still considered being junior recruiters. It was a lot about name generation. It was a lot about helping a recruiter to have less work. And we made the step to have a general opinion that sourcing is an own profession. It is important, and it's not just a junior recruiter. The next step for a sourcer is not necessarily anymore to become a recruiter. It is to become a more senior sourcer. And now we wanted to take the next step. What is the next step for sourcing to evolve and to go with the time? And this is what I want to look at. Initially, I've worked with John Resourceful Rose, so shout out to him. But quickly about myself, I'm co-founder at YourSource, which is your socially responsible TA partner. Looking back at my history and my career, I started back an agency in southern Germany, which was a very sales-driven agency. Pretty quickly realized that's not my thing. I mean, I always got the feedback you need to wear nice clothes, a suit, definitely not flip-flops. You can't have a beard because that's for hipsters. And I felt like, yeah, I'm gonna embrace that hipster lifestyle. I started my own company and started supporting mainly tech companies like Spotify, Atlassian, Neobank, with sourcing and recruiting. I always enjoyed joining companies when they just started sourcing. And I had a lot of conversations with people that were like, yeah, I mean, it's really cool to see that sourcing actually can do more than just pipelining. And that's what is the fun about it. 2.5 years ago, or roughly 3 years ago, actually, I joined Volvo Cars. to help them build a strategic sourcing and talent intelligence function, which now, when I left, I'm not there anymore, actually ended being a talent intelligence function under people analytics and a talent identification function. And why I'm pointing this out is because I consider the better word for sourcing to be talent identification. Sourcing is always connected to reaching out to people and getting them somewhere into a pipeline. But that's not enough. For me, it is using data to find out where people are, find the right channel, and then get them in, whether that's a reach out or changing the job board or just changing a title. That doesn't matter. That already is talent identification. And this is why it's not sourcing to me, it's talent identification. Now, what I want to do is I want to give you an example of how you can build a high impact, small talent identification function. And I want to use the case study that I just had at Volvo Cars, where we did this. We went in building a sourcing function and came out having a high impact talent identification function. So this will be the red thread throughout the entire presentation, but not the only one. So where did we start? Like in our case, we had already overcome the starting point when I joined where like sourcing didn't really exist. No one had like thought about it. There were a lot of like parts in the business that hired their own sources. And we were at the point where we said, okay, now we have a function that is centralized in TA that is not considered a pure support function, but it's still a support function. We did provide candidates as our major responsibility. And we wanted to transform that into a strategic advisory function. What we had seen is when we delivered candidates, what happened a lot is hiring managers and recruiters saying, cool, we have this function that can help us. They are just there and they don't have their own recs. So I could get another 5 good candidates. I mean, I already have 15, but let's have 5 more that are good and I have more choice. What happens then is you never look at those 5 sourced candidates. And one, you've put a highly skilled sourcer on finding candidates that no one looks at, which is a huge cost for the business. But 2, you've reached out to someone and said, hey, you are the one person that is a perfect fit for our role. You have these unique skills. I'd love to talk to you about it. And then said, oh, sorry, yeah, we won't interview you. We hired someone else. That's a huge harm to your brand. And you can't blame the recruiter nor the hiring manager. You just need to find the right way to work together. And that's not it. Also, coming from this environment where you relied a lot on that's what we do, and on the common sources, as we post everything on LinkedIn. This is how we rely on people applying. You don't typically have a data educated approach. This means decisions are not taken based on what actually works, based on data, but rather on what do I think works? What am I used to? And I mean, if we're honest with ourselves, typically we tend to then choose what we're most comfortable with because that's the easiest. So it kind of works best for us. But something else could work better if we get used to it and get out of our comfort zone. And we'll only find out what it is if we gather the data around it. This also leads to no strategic use of tooling and job boards. I mean, in our case, we were even at the point where hiring managers had bought job boards that TA didn't know about and expensed it on their credit card. So obviously we didn't know how they work. We didn't know if they performed or not. And not even if maybe 5 different people had bought from them and we could have got the discount, which leads to lack of performance data. We didn't have data to say, This is what works. This doesn't. We simply put everything on LinkedIn. So in summary, all of this leads to decisions being driven by biased historical experience. And it can be biased in so many ways. It could be biased because I've been in the company for 15 years. It could be biased because of my cultural background. It could be biased because of I'm coming from a tech company. Whatever it is, it typically is biased. So what did we do with that? We took our function and transformed it into a hands-off consulting function. We were not primarily doing hands-on sourcing. We moved our team to a virtual sourcing team. You don't necessarily need an own function for it. The closer you are to the recruiting teams and to the business, the more impact you'll have. You still need to share knowledge, share tools, share the environment, and share the passion. So we kept a virtual team, which means every talent identification specialist was reporting to a recruiting manager. They were sitting in the recruitment meetings, but they still had their own team meetings and they had their own sourcing jams and paired sourcing sessions. We secured data governance in an environment where you don't heavily rely on data, where you are not used to the approach of working with data. It's a huge danger to not secure the data governance. You need to ensure the data is correct and it's not outdated. Then we focus on talent identification and training over sourcing. So what does that mean? We drive the talent attraction strategy. How do we use our talent attraction budgets? How do we get people in? What should we do? We identify the talent. What are our competitors? Where do they sit in terms of geolocation? What are the platforms we should go on? Or do we maybe have those people internally? I mean, the tendency we do have is to say, okay, we need a new person, especially if it's a new skill set, we should hire them externally. But sometimes we have the right people in-house already. We just need to upskill them. Based on all of that information, we then recommend a recruitment strategy. What are the right keywords and titles? What is the right compensation package? And what do you get with the compensation package you have? How do we find them? Do we need to go out and source them, or will we get them as applicants? What kind of tooling are we using? Again, should we go internal or should we go external? How can we use talent pools? I mean, basically every corporate has a huge ATS with a ton of data in it, and it's not used. So make use of it. Take the first step into looking at the data you already have. These are people that already are engaged with your brand. And this is how the flow looks. So basically, a talent identification specialist should be involved at the rec distribution stage. I guess all of you have at some point the point where a recruiter gets the rec and someone decides how the recs are distributed. At that point, this lead or manager or whoever does it should sit together with the talent identification specialist and go through those recs. The talent identification specialist uses data mapping to say, this is a pipeline role or this is a role we commonly have. We do have a library of talent mapping. So we know this will be easy through our normal channels. We don't need to do anything further. We hand off the talent mapping from our database and like they're good to go. If we say, okay, this is a bit, we need to do something different. We can't just post it on LinkedIn and go. Then we start a further analysis. Where do the people sit? What kind of people are they? What are our competitors? Doing a proper talent mapping. So then we identify the talent. The first step is look in our internal ATS. Do we have people that are already engaged with our brand and could be a fit to this role? If yes, let's do a long list, send them over to the recruiter and the hiring manager. Awesome. We have saved a ton of hours. We don't even need to post this role. If we realize, okay, we don't have those people in our ATS yet. So then we need to determine, do we need to source this talent actively, or can we get them to apply? If we decide, okay, we don't need to source them actively, the talent identification specialist will identify the right job boards, the right platforms to be on. It doesn't necessarily need to be a job board, could be a social network or anything else. Share the talent insights and the channels together with certain recommendations with the TA partner and the hiring manager, and let them go from there. If we say, okay, this will require active sourcing, then we again share the talent insights, but we do a sourcing training with the TA partner. What the talent identification specialist should not do is to do the actual sourcing. Because if we do this 3, 4, 5 times, the TA partner will be able to do the sourcing themselves. They don't need this training and this kickoff anymore. What means we have an entire TA department that is passionate about sourcing, can do sourcing, has a data educated approach to working, and can take this from there. So we save a lot of time and are way more efficient than we were before. Now I keep saying like we use this data, but how do you get the data? So one, we had the talent intelligence function, which I highly advocate for any kind of bigger company. I mean, I guess it's hard to invest in for a smaller company, but as soon as you're a bit bigger, you can actually do that. And they will do the data education on a competency level. Everything that is the bigger picture, and before it actually turns out to be a wreck. Then you need to track the performance of your job boards and do it in-house. See what data you can already get from your ATS, what you can gather, what you can get from service you do. Like, see what data you already have and how you can track any additional data, because they want to sell stuff to you. So how reliant is the data you get from them, and how much is it biased towards what they want to sell to you? And I mean, there are job boards out there saying we have this amount of influenced hires. How easy is it to follow up if that is true, and how that is gathered? Then a standardized intake template. So how, like, taking a data mapping to every intake meeting with the hiring manager. One, you will always gather this data in a database. It will be a library that you then can use at direct distribution. Two, the hiring managers know you will always come with the same kind of data. That is a huge empowerment for the TA partners, being in the intake meeting, not anymore saying, this will be really hard to fill. Yeah, I mean, I've done this 10 years and it's really hard. Instead, they can say, look, this is your talent pool. These are our competitors. This is what they pay and the brand awareness they have. These are the locations they sit. Based on what you have here, you have this pool of people. If you change this in your job ad or this location, your pool will be twice the size. And this is why it's important to say we're data educated, not data driven. You don't take the decision for the hiring manager. You let them know what the impact is when they take the decision they want to take. They can't be surprised anymore if it takes long to find a unicorn, because you show them how the pool looks. Then the KPI tracker. And this is where I feel you have the difference between a good and an excellent sourcer. Because an excellent sourcer, when they send 10 messages, they just don't see 10 potential candidates or prospects. They see 100 data points and gather those data points in one KPI tracker and it will become more and more, and you have an entire team doing this. This is a huge data source that tells you so much about your brand, how you're perceived in the market, how the market looks, how your personal work works, and what you need to change. We had it in a huge Power BI because we didn't have a tool for it, but it was an awesome source of data. And then you have the internal and historical data that you work with anyways. So how to use this data then? You build out and advise on the recruitment strategy. How can we change a job ad to make it more appealing or more suitable to the market we are at or to the candidates we're at? And to give you an example, we had a role at Volvo Cars where it had been open for several weeks. And they requested sourcing support because they said we don't get the right applications. So one of the sources started with the talent mapping, and the outcome was looking at the skills, the location, the companies. We should be able to get those people. Shouldn't be that hard. There is a good enough pool. Looking at the title, not. So the only thing we needed to do was to change the title, and within 2 weeks, the role was filled. Sometimes it's that easy. And there we're coming back to talent identification versus sourcing. That's a part of it. And that's the most efficient approach to get a role filled that helps everyone. But yeah, also, should we post or not? Like, what is the right choice? Going active sourcing or posting a role? And there you always have to have in mind how long it takes for you to go through one application. If you have the role posted and you have 50 applicants that are not a fit on one that is a fit, how much time does it take to go through those 50 applicants versus finding that one applicant that is a fit by active sourcing? Oftentimes, for niche and senior roles and hard to fill roles, you spend less time finding that one candidate with active sourcing than it takes you going through candidates that are not a fit in your ATS. Obviously, depending on what kind of ATS you are and how good it is. So yeah, should we source? If so, where do we source? How do we source? What are the companies we should approach? And where should we put the role? Maybe you have several locations, and maybe we should just change the role location. What is the salary range? And there again, it's not about saying we can fill that role. It's about saying for this compensation, this is the profile the market gives you. If you want this, you need to pay that. And now it's up to you to decide what you want. But also you identify how to use your TA budgets. What do you spend your talent attraction budget on? If you know where people sit, you know what kind of people you will need in the future, you can put your budget targeted on that. The recruitment support. So one, you know when not to use an agency because it's not necessary and you could save that money, and they are quite expensive, but also you know when to use them because the time you will spend on not filling the role and on having your internal team doing 10 times as much as an agency that has those people in their network is more expensive. So sometimes the outcome is we should use external recruitment support. And then how to spend your budgets on social media and on job boards. So connected to this, and this is where it gets interesting for you when you say, okay, I want to pitch in a talent identification or sourcing function, however you want to call it, to your business. And I've heard many people say, I've tried to pitch in a sourcing function, and my manager said the recruiter should be able to do it. Which is fair enough. If you say it's about finding candidates, period, I would still consider it a separate function, and probably a recruiter can't find everyone, a sourcer could. but they should be able to source. And a good, well-rounded recruiter has been in a sourcer role. A good, well-rounded sourcer has been a recruiter role. But now you're adding stuff to this. It's not primarily about finding candidates. It's primarily about advising the business to be more efficient, to be more data educated. And this is where you make a change. This is where it gets easy to sell this in, because looking at the SLAs, one is cost per hire. If you spend less money on tooling, you're more efficient, you have less time reviewing applicants, you spend less time in interviews, spend less money on tools, your cost per hire goes down. That should be an SLA for this function, to decrease your cost per hire. And like, looking from a business perspective, me going to my CEO saying, hey, I can save you money, it's a pretty easy calculation. The application to interview ratio should become better, with less applicants per interview, which decreases the time we spend on applications and on interviews. The time for application review goes down. The interview to offer ratio should increase. We have less interviews per offer. It should be called decrease. Anyways, so it becomes better. We have less interviews per offer, which is an incredibly important point. And there you need to see how you can calculate that for your business. But basically what it means is you have a recruiter screen. You have 3 interviews with the business, with 2 interviews each, and then you make an offer. If we can decrease the number of candidates being in those 3 interviews with the business, that means per candidate 6 hours the business doesn't spend on interviewing. That is a ton of money per candidate. If you do it on scale, it's even more. And then, and this is completely undervalued and super important, the hiring manager and candidate promoter score will increase. Why? Because having less candidates in the pipeline means you have more time to spend on those few candidates that are an actual fit. You have less candidates you have to say no to that are annoyed by that. You can prep them better. You're faster in scheduling. You're more attentive. You can give feedback faster. All of that leads to a higher candidate promoter score. On the hiring manager side, apart from you having more time for them as well, you're showing the hiring manager you have more happy candidates. You're showing the hiring manager you actually know what they do. A hiring manager spending less of their team's time in interviews will always be a happy hiring manager. So yeah, definitely your hiring manager promoter score will increase as well. So what are the client business wins? And I on purpose called it client business wins because this works for an agency equally as it works for a corporate or any other product company. In our case, we reduced the team size for the sourcing team from 13 to 4. At the same time, we raised the impact. We were saving budget by a more strategic approach. You have a shorter time to hire. You have a better hiring manager and candidate experience. And the entire TA department gets a better standing in the business. They become strategic partners. But on that way, what were our learnings? And this goes for us. Maybe you'll have different learnings, but something you can take on the way when you want to do this and try this. You can't jump into a company and say, hey, here I am. I'm your new strategic partner. I will tell you what you have to do and expect people to say, awesome, that's great, let's do it. You need to actually prove your value by operational work first. Start with sourcing. Introduce data on the way more and more and more until you are this strategic function. Use generative AI and automations to improve data extraction. You won't have a happy sourcing team if they need to do everything manually. Trust me. Data education is key. It's for the business, it's for you, and you need to upskill people. You need to get them in this mindset. Start with that early on. Start when you start the function with the operational work. Start introducing data. Talk about data education all the time. And do that not only with the business, with TA, with recruiters, with hiring managers, with HR, the entire, like, use data education as much as you can everywhere. But also be agile. There is not the one approach that works. Don't take, hey, this is what Linus said, this is what we're going to do, and then you just do it. We needed to change the course we took several times. And actually, the feedback you need to downsize, taking that into, okay, we create even bigger value for talent identification. We make this even more important to justify that function, gave us the win to come up with this, to say, okay, this is how we can secure the function in times where others might not be secured. So this agility is super important. And to be agile and to understand when you need to adjust, you need to be data driven as well. You can't think others should be that and don't work data educated yourself. You need to track how you are on course, how you are doing for the business. So here are the points I hope you take away from today. You need to build the right foundation through operational work. Don't jump in and say, I'm the new person here, I'll fix everything, and trust me. You need to provide as many individuals with a direct advantage as possible. You have two ways. You have either people blocking you or people supporting you. If people see they get an advantage of you being there, the chance is high they will actually support you. And with what we do, you can give everyone an advantage. So take that with you. Then strategic data has more value for the business than pipelining. I mean, obviously, in core of us and in core of our function is to finding candidates. And that will never change. We will always find candidates. It will always be part of our work. But don't let your ego be bigger than the company. And for the company, the most valuable thing is the data you can provide. And no one can provide as much data as you, as the talent identification team, can do. So with that, moving into a strategic approach, you can have an even higher impact with a smaller team. Going away from just sourcing, just finding candidates, to providing data. For your company, that means they will have a competitive advantage towards others who are not doing this, because they understand how they can build their future talent strategy, where to grow, how to grow, why, what an impact means, what timeline do we need to build a new product. So thanks a lot. I'm open for questions. Also,
Great. Well, that was very interesting, Linus. So many great insights to drive meaningful sourcing outcomes. It seems like with the right approach, the end of sourcing may not be so near. So that, I guess, is a positive thing. Now, let's open the floor for questions.
yes.
I believe they're coming in from several angles. Here is a question from MJ. What advice would you give to someone who just started sourcing and has spent a lot of money on ads? Good one.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think you really need to map out what kind of budgets worked and what didn't. So I assume you're using those ads on different platforms, and don't only rely on what the platforms provide you, but actually track. I mean, typically the ATS can help you. In our case, it didn't, but it could help you to see where people come from. Map it by whatever you want to target, and get the data on what worked to then adjust your budget for the future.
Thank you. So Steve Levy also had a couple of things they wanted to shout out. Most important metric might be the total addressable market. This is where sourcing meets talent intelligence. I like that one. And he also says, Linus, for those making the transition from IC to sourcing manager, what is the one thing you would do differently, knowing what you know now?
From transition from IC to source manager, what's one thing you would do differently? Doing different during the transition. Is there a possibility to add to the question? So I mean, generally, I think sourcing in general has changed, and I mean, there are so many people sharing to that, but I always have been very hands-on, and very late came to the change of how much data actually means. So I would have started that journey early. I don't know if that was the actual question, or if the question was more towards what I would do different in the transition towards a manager. I think when I moved into a manager position, I started focusing much more on the people management side. And I actually I felt it's really hard to get from the sourcer where in your kind of funnel and your focus on one thing to actually get to a people person who manages people. And I probably would have prepared to that earlier if I would have known, which I might.
Oh, that's a good learning. I think that is also kind of what Steve was going with that question. Steve, feel free, if you wanted to have more comments from Linus. For now, let's go to Flo. Flo asked, what is, in your opinion, the best ATS to source and gather data?
I mean, I haven't worked with every ATS. I had really good experiences with Greenhouse and Lever. I think there's so many good ATSs out there that do pretty similar things. So at the end, it's really up to what you need as a company. Do you need good integrations? Do you need to have a good data reporting? If so, what kind of data is important for your business? That there is not, it's similar to the question, what is the best tool? There is not one, there are like 1,000 of them. So it's a bit, you should do a good requirements analysis for what you need and then decide what is the right ATS.
And also let them do demos, right? So you can actually see it. Yeah.
Yeah, that should be part of it.
For sure. And Flo is also asking, what would be the most interesting KPI or OKR to track the success of a young talent identification team?
Of a young talent identification team, I feel like the SLAs we had are already very high level. I mean, breaking it down to people, it's about gathering data points, and this is very important for me to track, like how many different, like how up to date is the data gathering, which shows of having the right. I think sourcing and talent identification is a lot about data tracking and mindset. If you have the right mindset, and this is hard to track as a KPI, but now my computer is turning black and I don't know why.
Oh dear.
It's yes, super important. So I would say, what kind of data points are tracked? How many of those? How is the conversion rates improved because of your team? Because that then leads to all the other aspects of it.
Well, thank you guys for all the questions. Is there anyone else who is in the webinar who also wants to ask Linus something? The floor is still open for questions. I think it also has a lag, so it takes some time to upload the question. So we'll wait.
And I mean, people can always reach out to me over the normal channels.
Oh, here we go. Shady Zumba. What have been your top 3 talent identification tools outside of LinkedIn?
This seems a lot like a commercial session now. I mean, one definitely we didn't have the best systems. So and I on purpose I'll go away from just mentioning sourcing and talent intelligence tools. We worked a lot with Power BI and Excel, which was incredibly important. And this actually how everything started. Every sourcer individually tracked their stuff on Excel, and we realized, hey, we have a lot of valuable data here. Let's put it into one Power BI. So that's definitely been number one. We worked a lot with CCAT as well. Now, a lot of others will say they're better tools. Depends on what you like. So I'm not a huge fan of calling out the top tools, apart from saying a good CRM, a good ATS, and good old Excel and Power BI will help you.
Thank you for that. So, yeah, I think that there's definitely companies out there that could still do with using some of these tools to maximize all that data that they have in their ATS. Let's see if outside of Shady Zumba, there's someone else who still wants to ask a question. Still have some time. All right. Well, it seems like we're done with the questions. Yeah, I guess we can wrap up. A huge thank you to Linus, of course, for sharing your expertise today. And thank you to everyone here for tuning in. Do not miss our next webinar on February 6th with David Galley. Mark your calendars because it's going to be another must-watch session. Yeah, you can stay connected with us on LinkedIn and subscribe to our YouTube channel and sign up for a newsletter for all the latest updates. The links are in the description below. So thanks again, everyone, and see you next time.